Okay, so I was talking to Cronikeys on Discord and just asking her about Trump and all kinds of shit like that. And at one point, she made the claim that the reason that Sweden has such a high sexual assault rate versus Finland is that Finland is racially homogenous and Sweden isn't. And as a counter argument, I said, well, Canada is not racially homogenous and its sexual assault rate is comparable to Finland. And she made the argument that Canada's segregated, like all the different races are, live in different areas, which from my personal experience, I was pretty sure that wasn't right, but luckily there's statistics for that, so I looked into it. As for the homicide rate, there's like no real correlation. Sexual assault rate, let me go in here. Yeah, no real correlation, and this is for just citywide specifically. So this, strictly speaking, this wouldn't account for correlation. This just takes the among, let's see, Brampton to Winnipeg, these cities from 2011. I have I'll link what I used. I guess I could do that now. I have it here for the countrywide specifics, just demographics of Canada, Stat Canada, that shit, and that there for the neighborhood thing, which I'm about to get into. There's the essentially Stats Canada, or Toronto's statistics specifically. They keep demographics on the ethnicity and median income and shit like that for each neighborhood. And the police department has crime rates. So Toronto specifically had Toronto's assault rate. .47 per 100,000, which is less than quite a few of these cities. So that is for the neighborhood specifically. Here I have the total number of sexual assaults in that neighborhood, the population of that neighborhood, and then dividing this with that, you get the rate. So it's like a per 100,000. Well, not quite per 100,000, but per population. And then they give the visible minority percent, which is basically the number of people that aren't like white people, essentially. And this, in terms of segregation, this anything above 50, like for this, for some places like the first two here, it's like 79 and 86. To say that that's like 86, I know one place had like 95. It was Chinese people. It was like one neighborhood which was predominantly just 95% Chinese. So in that sense, if you want to talk about segregation, then it would be a 5% minority. So I have that's what this adjusted visible minority percent versus assault rate is. Anyway, here's the first one. This number here is the least R squared value. So it's essentially the amount of variance explained by the line. Ideally, it would be 1, and in a worst case scenario, it's 0. 0.07 is like really low. I'm used to like biochemistry shit, so in terms of crime statistics and psychology shit, it could be that they would expect them to be a lot lower. But anyway, the it appears to just fan out, kinda. There's data all over the place here, and the R squared value is 0.077, pretty low. For the adjusted visible minority percent rate, the R squared is twice as high, but still really low. You can see that the shape of the data doesn't really change, just the concentration of it. So that's That being said, the segregation did slightly increase, but that's still such a low R-squared value. I don't know if you could say that with confidence. And just for the shit of it, I also looked at the median income versus the assault rate in the neighborhoods. And again, it's low, but it's higher. The R-squared value is higher than the adjusted visible minority percent. And even graphically, you can see that there's much more of a trend here. It looks like it would, from the basis of this data, it looks like it would essentially have like a logarithmic sort of scale, or it would flat here, and then at the very low end it goes up, which is to say that, you know, in very high income places it got higher. So based on the facts of it, it looks like income is, the median income of a neighborhood is more of a factor than the segregation, I guess you'd call it, how racially homogenous the area is. Which isn't to say it's not a factor, just that it's less significant. I am not sure if 0.14 is that important, or not important, but like how significant that is, if you can quote that as being, you know, a confident correlation. And even if it was 1, hypothetically speaking, it would be a strong argument that there is a correlation, but you need to keep in mind that correlation isn't, does not imply causation. There could be an associated factor that is actually the cause of it, which is why the Stats Canada reports on sexual assault, which take in many more factors, such as the age and the age and occupation of the victims, and I think it's this is one of them. Anyway, I was reading about it. Basically, age is I think they said it was the biggest factor, and students were also higher risk. This graph here is visible minority versus medium income. Median income, I think I said medium. But 0.231, which is even higher R-squared, so it looks like there's a strong correlation between the income versus how many non-whites there are, which is to say that essentially the more white people there are, the percentage-wise, the more income it is. Now, based on what Cronikeys was saying from she quoted a book called The Bell Curve, which had essentially used in a military aptitude test, and uses the responses of that from like 12,000 people, and ranked it so that it's like, here's what the white people did, here's how the blacks did, and all that. And it used that to say that white people are indeed smarter. But if you were to look at the questions of the aptitude test, a lot of it is just straight up factual knowledge that's more indicative of how well educated they are. It's not necessarily an IQ test per se at all. And I think you could essentially make the same mistake here of saying that correlation is causation, and saying that the reason that these neighborhoods have a less income is because there's a higher visible minority percent, but there could be another factor you do not know, because correlation does not imply causation. The adjusted visible minority, so like the segregation factor, was less of an issue with median tax income. I'll link this graph in the description of the video, but based on the facts, it looks like there's not like there's better indicators of risk for sexual assault than race, but I'm not sure where Cronikeys was getting her for information. She was just sort of spouting a lot of stuff. With the only evidence or the only straight up source she cited was the Bell Curve, which it's correlation is not causation. Even if you were to, strictly speaking, that book, it's just, there's a reason it wasn't in a science article. Like, it's, to say, even if you were to say that all of human intelligence and the different ways you can think or perform mentally, if it can be reduced to one number, even if you believe that is true, and you just say that, okay, it can be reduced to one number and we can measure it accurately, the test that they were doing is not in test of that number. G, it was called. It wasn't an IQ test, so I don't understand how it's even relevant. But anyway, this is what the facts are. So for those that are interested in demographics and crime and shit like that, I'll link it in the bottom. See ya.